On today's Locked On Jayhawks, backs against the wall, a must-win for KU against TCU as we preview the game.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. You can find this show, Locked On Jayhawks, anywhere you get your podcast and on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show, and thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. And on today's episode, we're previewing KU TCU. It is a must win for the Jayhawks, and we'll get into why. Our headlines: TCU scouting report, matchups of the game, players to watch, Hawks to soar, pick a prop, all that sort of stuff on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So this is a 2:30 game happening in Arrowhead in Kansas City, and this is their first game in Arrowhead after playing some of the games at Sporting, and that is one of the storylines in this. What is the capacity going to be for this game? Obviously, Arrowhead holds close to 70,000 people, and I think had KU been, 3-1, 4-0 coming into this game, there's a chance you maybe get 50, 60,000 people in attendance to this game. I don't know, maybe the 60 is high, but probably 50,000 people, somewhere around there, at least 40. Now, with the current state of things, does it end up being 30? Does it end up being 25? Does it end up being 20? Those are worries. You have, 20 commits coming out to the game. And obviously, for some people, there are a lot of KU fans who live in the Kansas City area. This might actually be closer for them than going to a KU game. And the, tailgating situation might be even better, right? Because there's, Arrowhead is known for its tailgating scene. So, maybe for some, this will be better for the local Laurentians. Maybe it becomes harder. And if you were 50-50 on going, maybe the fact that it's in Arrowhead now as opposed to in Lawrence, I don't know, maybe that changes things. I hope there is a good attendance, though. I do think it's a cool opportunity to see KU in a pro stadium, and it's going to be good weather, all that sort of stuff. But we will see. Both teams are coming off tough losses in different ways. And so really for both these teams, similar to last week against West Virginia, it was a game kind of desperation. Both teams really needed the win. KU ended up losing the game. This game, kind of a game of desperation. TCU comes in, losing a couple games already this season. And if you caught our Locked On crossover episode, there's a chance that Sonny Dykes has his name on the hot seat if you lose this game and another one soon. That could kind of be the case, even with going to the national title game just a few years ago. They're in a desperation mode. They just lost by over 20 points to their basically in-city rival for Kansas. This obviously, you're playing at home. You lose this game, you're sitting at 1-4, and then going on the road against a good Arizona State team. We're starting to talk about is the Kansas-Houston game the toilet bowl in the Big 12? Not trying to be harsh with that, but that is just kind of the reality of if you lose this game. And then also our final storyline here. This is the first meeting for Jalon Daniels with TCU since that 2022 game, which, if you remember, was when things kind of turned south on the 2022 season. Obviously, it was still a great season overall. KU made their first bowl game in, X amount of years. But that was the game that, College game days there for the first time. Kansas still nearly beat TCU regardless of it, but Jalon Daniels gets hurt at the end of the first half. And ever since then, Jalon has had some of the different injury stuff that has happened, and the story has been kind of different than if you would have stayed healthy through that game. Who knows? Maybe they win that game. Maybe TCU doesn't even go to the college football playoff title game. Who knows what KU does at that point in time? Just kind of crazy, some of the stuff that goes back to that. So certainly some interesting storylines from that game. As far as the TCU scouting report, TCU is one of the best offenses in the Big 12. They're averaging 39 points per game about. That's third in the Big 12. They are at sixth in yards per play, so a little bit lower there, still upper half. I think some of that you see their tempo. They play at a fast tempo. They get a lot of plays off, so that's going to inflate some of the total numbers, like the points per game or total yards. But if you look at yards per play, it's a little bit lower. But still, any way you cut it, it is a good offense. And how they get it done is pretty one-dimensional, but they've still been effective. Right now, they're 15th in the league. There are 16 teams in the Big 12. Maybe I should just start calling it the Big 16. Regardless, they are 15th in the league in yards per rush and rushing yards per game. So they cannot run the football. Kansas has been pretty good against the run so far. The bigger question is how your pass defense is, because TCU is 5th in yards per pass. They are 2nd in passing efficiency in Big 12 play. Very good passing attack. Now, on the defense side of the ball, this has not been a very good defense. They are 2nd to last in the Big 12, giving up 32 points per game. KU is 3rd to last on offense, so quite the matchup here between a bad defense, what's been not a great offense. If Kansas can put up 32 points, though, that would be their most in an FBS game. For what it's worth, the over-under for TCU, their team total in this game is only 28.5, which, just looping ahead for a pick a prop, that would probably be my scoop. I think they scored more than 28.5 points. But regardless, KU's 3rd to last on offense, so they're trying to get it going against bad defense. They were trying to get it going last week against a bad West Virginia pass defense, and they couldn't really do that. TCU's 8th in yards allowed per play, so they've actually been better than the points allowed per game shows. And again, that goes back to the idea of the offense running tempo, more possessions, yada, yada, yada. But kind of like the offense, what's interesting about the defense for TCU is they're one-sided. TCU is 6th in the league in yards allowed per pass, and 7th in passing defense efficiency, so basically middle of the pack, upper half of the pack in passing defense. Against the run, TCU is 12th of 16 in yards allowed per game, and they are 14th in rushing yards allowed per game. So 12th in yards per carry, 14th in rushing yards per game. I think I might have said that wrong. But regardless, not a great running defense, point being. And they give up a lot of running yards to quarterbacks in addition to the running back so far this season. They've been a really good 3rd down and 4th down offense. This is a team that has explosive weapons on the outside with receivers. Josh Hoover gets the ball out quickly. They're a quick passing game offense, and they will throw it around the field. It is very much similar to some of those classic Texas Tech teams, I guess, would be a good way of thinking about it. So the importance of this game, this is a must-win for KU to salvage this season, right? It's not a must-win in terms of heads are going to roll or somebody's going to get fired or there's like somebody's going to get benched. No, not necessarily for that. But if you're talking about salvaging this season, which to me, salvaging the season is making a bowl game at this point in time, you have to win this game. You lose this game to make a bowl game, you have to go 5-2 to finish. And this is one of your probably, I mean, you only have a limited number of home games. And if we're ranking the opponents that you still have to play, like K-State's better than TCU. I think Arizona State's better than TCU. Both of those are on the road. Iowa State's better than TCU, right? So BYU is better. And that one's on the road too. So like, this is a must-win game if you want to salvage that season and make another bowl game. And for TCU, being a 2-2, they're probably looking at this pretty similarly, which is like, hey, if we want to salvage, being a 7 or 8 win team, we have to win this game, right? It's maybe not as dire as KU sitting at 1-3, and the fact that they're on the road, whereas KU is at home, like you got to hold serve at home. But that's still a scary place to be in this game, where it's like, if you lose, oh no, would be bad. And if we're talking about home attendance too, which is one of our top storylines, what's the home attendance going to be for the next home game against Houston if you don't win this game? That's a little bit scary too. So we'll get into the matchups of the game that could help determine this one, player matchups, players to watch, Hawks to score, all that sort of stuff. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Finishing things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, we'll get to the matchups, Hawks to soar, players to watch, all that sort of stuff on today's episode of the show. Thank you to everydayers tuning in each and every episode. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. If you're looking for a second listen, we did a KU basketball Big 12 bonus episode the other day. There was our Big 12 show with the roundtable earlier this week. You can check out Locked On College Football if you want to see what's going on around the country. It's a really fun Saturday upcoming, including that Alabama-Georgia game. Okay, first down matchup here. More motivated, clean football. that this is not like a statistic thing on. Actually, I will get to some statistics that show some of this stuff, but this is a little bit of for both teams, who can play the more clean football game. And I think that comes in different forms. When you're talking about clean football, you're talking about not being penalized. You're talking about not having sloppy turnovers. You're talking about not making mental mistakes, not having to use dumb timeouts, right? Just playing smart football, right? And for both these teams, in certain areas of playing clean football, that hasn't necessarily been the case this year. And also with both of their seasons getting off to maybe a worse start than they would have hoped, TCU losing to SMU, falling to 2-2, that could light a fire under them. You lose to your in-city rival, you hear about it all week, and they could be way more motivated. Or they could be down in the dumps about it and the start of the season. For Kansas, like same kind of thing. You could be more motivated by the fact that, man, we've been so close these last 3 games. If we can just get a little bit better, we could be 4-0 right now. So let's have that energy the rest of the season. Or it go the other way where it's like, yeah, this season ain't what we expected it to be. This is going to go off the rails, right? That can happen for either team. And that's the challenge of both head coaches, trying to kind of keep them on the rails. And so that can obviously affect, if you don't have that mental focus, how clean a football you end up playing. So for TCU, their big issue with not playing clean football has come from a penalty perspective. Horned Frogs ranked 15th in the Big 12 in average penalty yards per game. It was like their first defensive drive of the season against Stanford. I think they had 3 personal foul penalties on 1 defensive drive. And that has not really been something that has like corrected itself over the course of the season. So that's kind of a big one. For KU, I think not playing clean comes from mostly turnovers. Like there's little things you can talk about for both teams that apply for all of these, but like for KU, the main one has been the turnovers. Kansas is dead last in the conference in most interceptions thrown. They are near the bottom of the country in turnover margin. You have to take care of the football. And in close games, when you're not taking care of the football, when you're Kansas, you see the result of these last couple of weeks. All right, second down. KU not playing off coverage and tackling in space. This is kind of a 2-parter for me because I think both apply to basically, if you want to sum this up in one way, Kansas defending short and quick passes. When you look at TCU, they get a lot of quick passes out in space and they make you try to miss. They've got a lot of really good receivers. They've got a lot of speed on the outside. They've got a lot of playmakers on the outside. And Josh Hoover delivers accurate footballs consistently, quickly. He does a good job reading at the line of scrimmage, all that sort of stuff. I mean, shoot, I think back to that TCU game. I'm still having nightmares about Quentin Johnson, what he did to you. And it felt like a majority of those were just rinse and repeat with him running like a slant or a post over the middle. And just continually burning your defense and you playing off coverage and all these things. I understand if you want to play off coverage here or there. I'm not saying you just never do it, but like I think you have to be willing to press a little bit in this game. You have to be willing to make them win at the line of scrimmage with the receivers getting releases. I think you have to be trying to kind of break up their tempo and their rhythm a little bit there. And I think you also have to have, and this is something that I actually am confident that Mello Dotson and Cobee Bryant could do in this game. I think if you're talking about a TCU team that's going to throw short a lot, I would not be surprised if Cobee Bryant or Mello Dotson, or maybe both of them, try to jump a route at some point on a slant or a hitch or one of these quick out routes. And it's just going to come down to, do they end up with the interception making the play, and could they return it for 6? Like that could be a game-changing play. They're going to have an opportunity in this game, but also, TCU is going to probably try to take advantage of that. But here's what I think is interesting to show this. TCU is completing 69% of their passes. That leads the Big 12. Typically, shorter passes are going to give you a higher completion rate, right? TCU has also only been sacked twice this season. So does that tell you that they have like the best offensive line in the world? I guess it's possible. I'm looking at Pro Football Focus, though. They are 77th on pass blocking grade on Pro Football Focus. So that's below average. What does that tell me? High completion percentage, but not giving up a lot of sacks, but also bad pass blocking grade. Tells me they're throwing a lot of those short passes, screens, hitches, slants, get the ball in the playmaker's hands, plus Hoover doing a good job getting the ball out. So KU cannot play back off coverage in this game. You have to play up. Can't let TCU get into that rhythm. And then if they do make those short completions, getting into the tackling element here, you have to be able to tackle in the open field, right? Don't allow a 6 or 7 yard slant to turn into a 30-yard gain or into an 80-yard touchdown. For what it's worth, Kansas 54th in the country right now in tackling grade, so have to avoid that big yard after catch play. Third down conversions specifically in the fourth quarter. Right now, Kansas ranks 4th in converting offensive third downs. They've actually done a pretty good job at converting third downs. Kansas is also 36th nationally in success rate on third plus fourth down. So they've been pretty good on the money downs. TCU's defense is last in the Big 12 and 111th in success rate nationally on third and fourth down. So that should be a good matchup for KU on third and fourth downs. But problem is, it's a good thing for the TCU offense too. TCU's second in converting offensive third downs in the Big 12. They're fourth in the country in third/fourth down success rate nationally. KU's defense is only 10th in the Big 12, so at least a little better than TCU, but TCU's offense has also been a little better at it. And then KU's defense is 109th in third and fourth down success rate nationally. So you have two offenses that are doing well on those key downs, two defenses that are not doing well. But the reason I bring up the fourth quarter specifically, because I think about these last couple of games, what has been the difference? It's been KU's been unable to convert some key third downs on offense. Right? You think about that in the West Virginia game. You think about the bad second down play against UNLV that led to you not being able to convert a third down. I think back to not being able to get off the field on third downs, or in some cases, making the stop on third downs, but then not being able to get off the field in fourth downs. You have to come up with the clutch plays in this game in the fourth quarter, because I expect it to be a close game, right? I mean, it's a 2.5 point spread. Even if Kansas wins this game, probably going to be a close game. So if it's a close game going into the fourth quarter and they have this good quarterback who's passing around the field, you're going to have to get off the field at some point with some of those third and fourth downs, because I don't think Kansas can win a shootout. Can you win a game where TCU scores over 30? Yeah, maybe you could win like 35-31. But, the more points get added on with the struggles KU's had offensively in passing the football, it's going to be hard for them to keep up if that becomes the case. So you got to get off the field there. Fourth down, on the hat, run the dang ball, and run Jalon Daniels. So I know that with Jalon, really in 2022, he was running a ton, right? And then 2023, he's only running on like, okay, it's a key down. Like, you got to pick this up, go run, take the hit. But for the most part, it's like, hey, run out of bounds, slide down, whatever it is. And that's kind of been the case this year as well. It makes sense. You have a guy who's had some injury stuff in the past, like no need to, risk it, I guess is the good way of putting it. But like, back's against the wall here, right? Not just for KU, but for Jalon Daniels, for the offense, for all sorts of things coming into this game. Like you said, it's a must-win for KU. No time to have bubble wrap around your quarterback, right? If this is a game where Jalon Daniels needs to take 15 carries to run for 90 yards and be the difference in the game against a TCU defense that has not been good against the run, against a TCU defense that has not been good stopping the quarterback run, you take the governor off. And right now, Kansas ranks third in the country in run blocking grade. TCU's run defense, giving up a lot. Run the dang ball, 20 to 25 carries for Devin Neal, 10 to 15 carries, maybe even 22 for Daniel Hishaw. I don't care. 10 to 15 for Jalon Daniels. I don't know. Do what the Ravens did to the Cowboys. I know. I don't know if there'll be that many plays for KU to run that many times. But like, I'm being hyperbolic a little bit, but like, I think, what was it? The Ravens against the Cowboys, they ran the ball like 45 times and threw it 15 times. Like, that should be KU's recipe against TCU in this game, something similar to that. So run the dang ball. Let Jalon Daniels run, let everybody run, and just try to possess the football, try to score, and keep TCU's offense off the field. On our player matchup, we'll get to that, and Hawks the Soar to finish up. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans or college football fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. No pick a prop because all the props aren't out at time of recording, but I mentioned earlier, I like TCU's team total over 28.5. I think Kansas could still win this game, even if TCU gets over that team total, but I don't know how much over they can afford to do that with. But still, if there are any player props, once they do come out, again, as a recording, they're not, but they will be at some point. I like the Jalon Daniels over on rushing yards, maybe even a Jalon Daniels rushing touchdown to anytime touchdown. Devin Neal or Daniel Hishaw, anytime touchdown. Those are always interesting. So you can check those out on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Finishing things up with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with our player matchups and our Hawks to Soar. Let's start with our player matchups. It's got to be the Kansas defensive backs against the TCU wide receivers. Now, you could go a couple different ways with this. You could go with the KU offensive line versus the TCU D line, the KU running backs versus the TCU defense. Jalon Daniels is every game, very important. Jeff Grimes calling a good game. But I think it's the KU DBs versus the TCU receivers. Not just in terms of the importance of the game. And we talked about KU trying to disrupt their rhythm and tackling in the open field. And maybe Cobee or Mello can eventually jump one on Josh Hoover. He was a little bit turnover prone a season ago. Maybe that's something you can take advantage of. But it's also just straight up, it's a fun player matchup. Like, TCU has all sorts of talent at the receiver position. and guys who are making plays, well, KU has good secondary talent as well. So I think it's just an awesome matchup in addition to that. Now, what's interesting, Kansas only ranks 56 in the country in coverage grade right now on Pro Football Focus. Is that have to do with that you don't have an Austin Booker rushing the passer, that's hurting things a little bit? Is it just you're jumping too many short routes? Is it that there hasn't been as good a focus as you might have liked? Is it that something's being exploited in some other way? I don't entirely have the answer. But it'll be interesting to watch in this game because this is the best passing offense that you've played to this point in time. Our Hawks to soar offense side of the ball. Let's go back to the well. Jalon Daniels running the football. It's tough to predict what you're going to get passing from Jalon right now, but here's what TCU has given up to opposing FBS quarterbacks running the football. Ashton Daniels for Stanford had 17 carries for 87 yards. KJ Jefferson for UCF had 9 carries for 46 yards. He probably would have wound up with more rushing yards if he needed to, but RJ Harvey had 180, their running back. So it was like, 9 for 46, good enough. Kevin Jennings, 10 carries for 41 yards. Same thing there. Like SMU's running back had like 120 yards. So it's like, well, we'll run it more if we have to, but we didn't have to. Total it up. That means over their 3 FBS games, the quarterbacks have 36 carries for 174 yards. That's 58 rushing yards per game on 4.8 yards per carry. That is a good total on the ground that they're giving up to just quarterbacks alone. But also, if I take out the sacks from the Stanford game, you would wind up with them allowing 120 rushing yards just to Daniels. So if you take out the sack yards and you're just talking pure rushing yards, those 3 quarterbacks, Daniels, Jefferson, and Jennings, the last 3 FBS ones that they've played, have totaled 207 rushing yards, which is closer to 70 rushing yards per game. That is a lot coming from just the quarterback, especially when they're giving up like 100+ yards to running backs or to the lead running back on top of that. So I think Jalon Daniels running the ball. Defensive hawk to soar here. We're going to go with Marvin Grant. I think this should be a game where KU should be playing in more light personnel. Also, Cornell Wheeler is injured right now. I don't think that Marvin Grant is the guy that's going to wear the green dot, but like, I don't know, what if you had him play with, if Cornell Wheeler is, injured or something, and especially if he's hobbled around trying to guard these good pass catchers, what if you had a lineup where basically you had a third corner in there, and then Marvin Grant is really your second linebacker playing kind of a hawk linebacker hybrid with JB Brown is the other guy, right? Like, or Taiwan Berryhill is the other guy, as opposed to having Berryhill and Brown and maybe losing a little bit more in the pass coverage. But regardless of where Grant is playing in a game like this, where they're going to be thrown around the field, I think this is a big game to have him play a huge amount of snaps, and he needs to have a good game for KU to come through. But also when you look at it, if they're making a lot of short throws, that means it's around the box. Marvin Grant coming up, making a big tackle. And in a game where we talked about you needing good tackling in the open field, right now, Grant has an 84 run defense grade. He has a 90 tackling grade. He has 19 total tackles, 0 missed so far. Knock on wood on that one for Marvin Grant. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you for a post-game recap of the KU TCU game. See you then with LOJ.